Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Joe Patrick on Football, where today we had some, big headline news with the Falcons introducing new head coach Kevin Stefanski at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Kind of a ho-hum affair, gotta say, and that's going to be a little bit of what we talk about as it relates to Stefanski and his introduction and just everything that happened today. But I gotta say, it's almost like headline 1A of just like him being announced today, because I think 1B is one of the things that he said. There wasn't a lot of news that came out of the press conference today. It was generally boring, but again, we'll talk about that. But the big headline news from the press conference is that Kevin Stefanski said that Tommy Rees will be the offensive play caller for this football team, which certainly, I'll just say it certainly caught me by surprise. I did not expect that whatsoever. Not that I didn't think it couldn't eventually happen. I just figured that with Kevin Stefanski coming in and, like taking accountability, quote unquote, and kind of having the trust of that veteran coach of, a frankly novice, leadership staff at this point in the front office with, just speaking about Matt Ryan and his role, that Matt Ryan would feel most comfortable if it was Kevin Stefanski with that proven track record calling the plays. But it was not to be the case, actually. It was Kevin Stefanski saying that he's very comfortable with Tommy Rees as the play caller, which Kevin Stefanski turned play calling duties over to Tommy Rees with, I think, 5 games left in the Browns season last year. But also surprised that Matt Ryan basically saying that he's very content with the arrangement of Tommy Rees calling plays. And there's been a lot of opinions about Tommy Rees here over the last several days since he was named the offensive coordinator for this team. A lot of people seemingly fearful about his ability to do the job, about his, I don't really know exactly specifically what the issues with Tommy Rees are. I haven't done a deep dive myself. People just seem generally dissatisfied with him as the offensive coordinator pick, and then they will especially be dissatisfied now that he is calling the plays. Let's hear a little bit about what Matt Ryan said when it came to, because I did want to, I was able to, thankfully, we were able to get some second questions in toward the back half of the press conference, and I was surprised nobody else kind of followed up with a question about Tommy Rees after he said that was going to be the case. So let's hear from this is actually from Matt Ryan when I went back to Matt and asked him, how much of a part of the process was the idea of Tommy Rees calling plays offensively for this team in the interview process as it related to Kevin Stefanski. Here's what he said.
Yes, certainly something we talked to all of the candidates that we spoke to about their vision for building a staff, maybe some of the ideas that they had at certain coordinator positions, and certainly something Kevin and I have talked about. I've leaned in to the reference work we've done on Kevin, we've done on Tommy, and we're making sure that we're talking to the people who have been around him, not only in Cleveland but in his college stops, and what he is like as a coach. I think these are big hires and important hires for them, and you want to make sure everybody's seeing it the same way. And so we did a lot of reference work on Tommy and feel much like Kevin, very strongly about him as a young coach and what he can do, and agreed that he's inexperienced when it comes to play calling in the NFL, but he's very experienced at calling plays.
So Tommy Rees, just to give some background on his background as a football coach. So Tommy Rees, he's only 33 years old. So that's kind of where this youth or inexperience or whatever, that's where that comes into play, obviously. I mean, he is younger by, I think, 3 months than the left tackle of this team, Jake Matthews. And Jake Matthews, it just goes to show that Tommy Rees is young, but he's been, obviously now he's the Falcons offensive coordinator, was the Browns offensive coordinator last year, and was a member of their offensive staff the year before that in 2024. In 2023, Nick Saban tabbed him to be the offensive coordinator for Alabama in Saban's last year. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, which is the same post that he held at Notre Dame from 2020 to 2022, his alma mater, Notre Dame, and he was the quarterback's coach at Notre Dame from 2017 to 2019 before that. So, and then, he had a couple of assistant jobs prior to that at San Diego. They were in San Diego at the time, the Chargers, and Northwestern as a GA was his first job out of college. That was in 2015. So, listen, I think it's a bit of a mystery box situation. What's funny is that I think fans were liking the idea of a mystery box candidate as the head coach to call plays. Maybe it's not as much of a mystery box considering he does have at least a little bit of background. I think it's the Alabama tenure, at least for a lot of fans in this part of the country, that kind of get people saying, that was an underperforming Alabama team in 2023. Didn't really feel like he got the most out of the talent that was on that team. So I think that's where some of the negative sentiment comes across, as well as obviously, when you're on part of a struggling Browns organization, which they were for the last 2 years, those being the 2 years that Tommy Rees was there. So I think that's where some of the negative sentiment comes from. I just want to say, from my perspective on this, while I am very surprised and I don't know if it's ultimately the right move, it may be the right move. And, what I try doing the show is just convey to you guys what is happening, behind the doors at Flowery Branch. It's not really to offer so much of my opinion. And, frankly, in this case, I don't even really have an opinion. I genuinely don't have an opinion. I do obviously have an opinion on some other things that take place, whether that's, any number, certain play call here or there, or, the way the team is being run offensively, et cetera, et cetera. But in this case, with a personnel that I have not even yet to meet, Tommy Rees, in my life, I'm going to kind of hold out my own judgments or opinions. And I think the thing that's worth noting about his background is that he has worked almost exclusively with quarterbacks going back to 2017, whether that's at Notre Dame, Alabama, Cleveland. There was 1 year in Cleveland where he was a tight ends coach, but he was a pass game specialist. So obviously still working with the quarterback quite closely, and that is kind of his specialty. And we'll see how he gets on with the quarterbacks that are in Atlanta, which is a huge question mark. And that was something that they later talked about, in the press conference. But I did also want to just share some sound from Matt Ryan when he kind of talked at the top of the press conference about, what is the vision for this Falcons team, and what does that mean they're going to look like? How does that come across with how the team plays stylistically? Here's Matt Ryan talking about the Falcons' vision.
We wanted a detailed, tough, physical football team. On offense, we want an offense that has the ability to run the football, that is going to be explosive with the pass game off of the run. On defense, we're going to stop the run. We're going to be physical against the run. In the pass game, we're going to affect the quarterback physically, and we're going to affect him mentally as well, with disguise, with the way that we play coverage. And then on special teams, we were looking for a unit that was incredibly detailed, that plays with great effort and strain. So it really set up the format for what we were looking for from the head coaching candidates that we spoke to.
So there you go, and what strikes me, what comes across is actually the word detailed. When he talks about the vision, he says detailed, tough, and physical. Obviously, we've heard tough, physical, competitive. Every coach basically says those things. If I'm to read into this at all, I think it's interesting that he uses detailed at the front of that. I think that is the main frustration that Matt Ryan specifically had with this Falcons team, at least last year. Who knows how far going back, but they just weren't sharp on the details when they needed to be, at least as sharp as he was. And from everybody that I've spoken to, and I'm sure that you guys, don't take any convincing to believe this, that Matt Ryan was as on top of the details as any football player could possibly be, and that he was almost a coach in that sense of getting his guys, not just himself ready on the details, but getting the rest of his receiving group, the rest of his offense, testing them to make sure that they knew what they were doing and getting the whole group kind of in line. It's something that's, that is not just a behavior, that is a culture. That is something that is established by players, which is what they said. This is a kind of a player-driven culture. That's something that Matt Ryan used in his in his statement in the press release announcing Kevin Stefanski that they wanted this to be an accountable but player-driven culture, and that's what Kevin Stefanski said himself today too, which is that if you want to have that level of accountability, if you want to have that level of guys, knowing the details of everything and all of that, that kind of stems from the players themselves. You have to have the players themselves in that locker room holding their own teammates accountable. It can't just be a top-down thing of the coaches kind of, paternalistically saying, like drilling these guys and making sure they have the details. And now, obviously, the coaches play a role in making sure that culture becomes established. And the coaches are probably going to have more of a role in the initial periods of this team, really setting the culture, the environment that these players can hopefully flourish and grow in. But, it's something that clearly Matt Ryan feels, very strongly about. And I thought that it was very telling that he used that word detail right off the front. And then something else you heard him say in that clip is that they want to run the ball, and I think that this leads me to, think of, an under center run game, not kind of the way that they've run the ball last year, but, the way that, frankly, again, I just go back to Matt Ryan, what his experiences would have been as a player, and him kind of wanting to see more of that kind of thing. And so I just think that they're going to be a more traditional running offense, especially with Bill Callahan. Even if you would have considered them a traditional running offense under Arthur Smith with Dwayne Ledford as the offensive line coach, they were almost not like, a normal running team in that they were running outside zone pretty much all the time. It's almost all they ran. In 2023, there were some new concepts that started to get mixed in. They started to do more split zone stuff. They started running counter a lot more, counter and tosses. But toss is kind of it's kind of a different way to run outside zone. But I think that Matt Ryan, he wants to run the football kind of in a more traditional way. And with the idea being that if you're able to do that, that's going to take the stress off of your quarterback. That's what's going to open things up for Michael Penix and make the game easier on him. And I think the coaches have ideas on, how they can effectively run the football in a myriad of different ways now with Bill Callahan involved on the offensive line, and take some of that stress off of Michael Penix. But I think it's worth noting that they didn't really gush over Michael Penix. And I don't think it's like they don't like Michael Penix or anything like that. But I noted this after the Matt Ryan press conference. They just weren't getting out. They're still not getting out over their skis in terms of kind of like anointing him as this or that, as kind of like saying like he's going to be around for, such and such time. Frankly, we don't know. And so much of Michael Penix's future is in question in large amount due to this injury that he suffered, this long-term injury, the third of his career. Two of those obviously happened in college. And this one, it just leaves you in a place where you don't know exactly who he's going to be when he returns, just not having had the reps, not having had the ability to, really physically improve that side of his game, during this period of time where he's on the sideline. So I think they continue, I would say, like disciplined with the way that they talk about Michael Penix and, even about the team. Like Kevin Stefanski was kind of shutting down the idea that, we press members could say, what do you think about Kyle Pitts? And that he was just going to kind of give a rundown of Kyle Pitts. And it was kind of boring press conference because of that, like because he wasn't going to kind of go into detail about what he thinks about, any of these given players or what the team is going to be or do this season. But I think that boring nature to his press conference, if I'm Matt Ryan, I kind of see it as more of a feature than a bug. Like, I don't think Matt Ryan gives a crap what people think about this press conference. I think that's pretty evident by the fact that, first of all, that they are allowing Tommy Rees to be the offensive play caller of this team. I could envision under different leadership, that head coaching interview with Kevin Stefanski going like, listen, Kevin, we're in this situation. We're stuck. We need a veteran play caller to come in and, give our fans confidence that you are, the capable person that's going to lead the charge. And we proved that by having you call the plays. We really need it to be you because you've got this track record. We can't, we can't afford for like the fans to feel a certain type of way because we're going to go with something different. In this case, it happens to be Tommy Rees. And I think that, whether it works or not is irrelevant to them just having the confidence to say, this is what we're doing. We don't care about how you think about it. Whether that's the Kevin Stefanski hire in general, which, by the way, like, had no idea people were so like conspiratorial about Kevin Stefanski, which is absolutely insane. But also with Tommy Rees, just like, look, if that's what Kevin Stefanski thinks best, if that's what Matt Ryan thinks is best, that's what they're going to do. They don't care about what the optics of that look like. I just feel like a different version of Atlanta Falcons leadership may not have been so amenable to kind of controversial decisions, I guess we can call them. At least like the Tommy Rees one is legitimately controversial. I mean, Matt Ryan said it himself in that clip, does not have a ton of NFL play calling experience, but clearly Matt Ryan is sold that he is a good offensive mind. And I think it's worth noting just a little bit that Kevin Stefanski said about him was that he said that Tommy Rees is a lot different than him, but that creates a good kind of tension between the two of them. And it's not like a bad tension, it's a good tension. Can't remember who said this recently. I think it was Matt Ryan talking about, like the best teams, the best coaching staffs. It's not all like kumbaya behind the scenes. Like they will have lots of fights, not physical fights, but just like arguments about ideas and the way that they should do things, and that actually forms, and like what that births is something better or the best possible kind of idea coming from that tension. So he did say that Tommy Rees is different. Stefanski said Tommy Rees is a little bit different than he is in the way that he thinks about the game. And the way I took it is that he's a little bit more, if I'm just to look at Tommy Rees's background as a college guy, a little bit more that what I would kind of call like modern football kind of mold, but with like, just different kinds of gadgety stuff and motions. And again, it's not to say that Stefanski doesn't do any of this either, but I just think that I think that Tommy Rees just kind of comes at the at things with a different perspective, obviously, than Kevin Stefanski does. And I think Stefanski sees that as getting the best out of Stefanski as well as Rees. So, for as kind of upset as you might be about Tommy Rees being the play caller, as bored as you may have been watching the press conference, if you found it boring, I think you can take heart in knowing that they don't care if that's how you feel about it. The only thing they care about is winning games, and as long as, if that's what you care about, I think it's what you should care about if you're a Falcons fan, then it probably means they have their heads in the right place. Now, whether they ultimately made the right decision or not with Kevin Stefanski, with Tommy Rees, with Craig Ackerman, the new special teams coordinator, whoever it is, they're thinking about football first. I'm very confident. Matt Ryan said that in his press conference when he was introduced, but this all kind of reinforces it to me, honestly. So that's how I'm feeling about it. There are some other news items for us to discuss here briefly, just kind of go over it. The GM search is dragging on, and I think along with many others, kind of assumed that Monday was going to be a day where they maybe made an announcement on who that GM was going to be, especially since they had this press conference coming the next day. Not that I ever felt the GM was all of a sudden going to be part of this press conference, but just thought that, well, I didn't think it really had anything to do with this press conference. I know some other people did. I just figured that, they basically had a week to interview candidates, and then they had the weekend after they had talked to 6 guys to ultimately kind of, debate it internally, and then, you make an announcement. But they're going to continue those interviews, and what I did not realize at the time was that these were virtual interviews. Jonathan Jones reported that, and so they're going to have more guys to Flowery Branch later, this week to have further conversations about the job. And so, I think this week will be the week where they really kind of have what I thought last week was, which is kind of like the interviews with all the candidates that they really like. And I think that they will probably, by the end of this week, most likely have announced a GM candidate. If not, certainly by, I would say, early next week. I can't imagine it getting too much later than that. And I think some people are concerned about this situation because the Senior Bowl is happening right now. As I'm speaking, the players are probably out there practicing, and the Falcons are represented down there. And I need to pull up the names. I just know it's their director of college scouting and the assistant director of college scouting. That would be Tumbo Abanaconda, and who is the director of college scouting, and Michael Ross. And then they are also assisted by a full suite of the Falcons scouting scouts, area scouts, things like that. So they're not, they're still doing all the work they need to do down there. Terry Fontenot didn't even go to the Senior Bowl last year either. They were actually, I think, the only team without a GM at the Senior Bowl. And I think that if they did have a GM, that GM would be down there 100%. But I just don't think they're rushing it, and they are staffed and equipped to do what they need to do in the interim. So, but I did have somebody contact me and say, like, what do you think about this? The fact that they haven't announced somebody yet. Like, do you think they're having trouble? I don't think they're having trouble. I would say that I think it means that they're maybe not as just locked into Ian Cunningham as the initial reports kind of suggested. The initial reports kind of suggested it was almost a foregone conclusion that Ian Cunningham, the assistant GM from the Bears, was going to be the guy because of the mutual relationships that he has with Ryan Poles and Matt Ryan has with Ryan Poles. But it certainly seems like they're spreading a broad net, and they're, I don't remember all the names off the top of my head. I don't want to remember executives' names, but they've got the Texans guy coming in. They've got, obviously, the 49ers guys at Josh Williams. I can't remember now off the top of my head. But, obviously some of these leading teams, they're having some of their personnel in to talk more about this job that's coming up. Last thing on the docket, just to kind of talk about, is a little bit more about the coaching staff. Kind of mentioned some of the coordinators at the top. I think we've talked about Jeff Ulbrich, keeping his role as the defensive coordinator. Kevin Stefanski did talk about that today at his press conference. Just said that they got along great. I'm kind of coming off of this feeling that I had that it was a mandate by the Falcons and Matt Ryan that you keep Jeff Ulbrich. But I think that they wanted to, but I don't know. Just like the way that Stefanski worded his answer, didn't really. I don't know. Made me think that he did have a choice in this, but ultimately he did feel that Ulbrich was somebody that he could get along with really well, and it's a good thing because that defense is young and improving under him and his staff, and there's some key position coaches that are also staying in Atlanta under him. Nate Ollie, maybe the most significant of the bunch, especially considering the production that he got out of that defensive line last year with the Falcons. Coming second in sacks in the NFL. Nate Ollie being really key with, a lot of the sacks not even coming from the edge guys, but a lot of interior guys getting home, which are the guys that Nate Ollie's coaching. Guys like Brandon Dorla, Zach Harrison was having a great year before he got hurt. Unfortunate that got cut short. But, David Onyemata had a good year. Rook had a good year. Great to see Nate Ollie stick around. Mentioned it, I was on the Falcoholic last week, and Jeff Ulbrich mentioned sometime last season that what they're coaching these defensive linemen to do with this attack style front. We've talked about the front, and the idea in the front is to you want to just penetrate the line and kind of create havoc in the backfield. But in order to be able to do that, you have to use certain techniques, especially as a defensive lineman, and the way that you use your hands, or maybe not use your hands. I don't know exactly what techniques are different from what players are taught, but Jeff Ulbrich said that the way that they teach guys is completely different. In fact, like coaches coaching your fundamentals coming up through football at basic levels would teach you not to do these things that they're coaching these players to do. So some of the stuff that they're trying to ingrain in these players has already kind of been ingrained for them to not do it. But it goes to show how good of a teacher Nate Ollie is, that he's been able to get these guys to implement some of these things that have led to such great results. So he stays. Justin Hood, the defensive backs coach, stays. I think that's kind of an under talked about one that I think is really important, because you have some really young defensive backs who I thought were coming along great. Obviously, Xavier Watts had a great year last year, but even guys like Kobe Bryant, I thought, he got, statistically, it doesn't look good for Kobe Bryant when he played last year, but I thought he was showing up in the right spots. I thought in different on a different play, he maybe makes a play on some balls. And I think the future is bright for Kobe Bryant. He's got to continue to improve, but I was actually really enthused with what I saw from him toward the end of last year. Again, even though sometimes these receivers were making catches against him, it's like that one against Arizona, that Michael Wilson catches that ball that like bounces off. Like Kobe Bryant literally breaks it up, and then the ball like bounces off of him as he falls to the ground back into Michael Wilson's hands. And he has a big long catch. I think it was for a touchdown too. So, and then Mike Evans has had some catches over him, but he was in position to make these plays. And so Justin Hood, I think, is a really good kind of influence on some of these younger defensive backs. You got other guys, Billy Bowman as well, obviously a guy they drafted. D. Alvord, we saw a really great year out of him, and returning to his nickel spot. I think pretty much almost everybody on that defense, at least on like this of the starting level, kind of overperformed expectations. Maybe even the reserve level. I'm thinking maybe only J.D. Bertrand. I'm just trying to think of players who would have underperformed expectations, and maybe J.D. Bertrand is probably the only one I can think of. Maybe Mike Hughes had a kind of a rougher year than what would have been expected, but not a huge sore spot. So really good job by Justin Hood, the defensive backs coach who's staying. And then Robert Prince, a wide receivers coach who's been around the NFL for a long, long time, comes from the Miami Dolphins most recently. Has a really extensive track record as a receivers coach. I mean, this guy's been coaching football going back to 1989 when he started as a grad assistant. But I mean, he's coached the Houston Texans wide receivers, Dallas Cowboys wide receivers, Detroit Lions wide receivers for half a decade or more. So like he's been around. He's also has extensive experience coaching receivers in college, where he spent a bunch of time at Boise State, Kellen Moore. So like lots of experience there in Robert Prince, and really good guy for the job, I think. So that's it. That's the show for today. Kevin Stefanski introduced. Let me know what you think. Sorry if I disparaged you. If you have any conspiratorial opinion on Kevin Stefanski, but yeah, let me know what you think. I'm sure it's not going to be something great, but especially if you have some unique perspective or insight or way you're thinking about it that's not just some it sucks, it's great, I don't know. But yeah, let us know what you think in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, which is on 929 The Game's YouTube channel, Joe Patrick on Football. That's where you find the show if you want to watch it. If you want to listen, just search Joe Patrick on Football wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching, just give us a like while you're commenting as well. So how about that? Thank you guys so much, and we will come back to you with our next show sometime later. How about that?